Heath, you asked on Threads for people to ask you Threads questions for us to answer on the Vergecast. Let's do a bunch of them. What
so this is a great one. I'm really curious what you guys think about this. Do you think the discourse can be different here on Threads than on Twitter? Or will the format eventually produce the same results? AKA hate speech, bullying, dunking, all that stuff.
I think the format will definitely produce a lot of similar results, but the fact that we're getting the Instagram aggressive moderation might mitigate some of that.
I think that's right. I mean, I think the thing that we've seen is that these platforms develop different norms really fast, right? Like Mastodon is different from Twitter, which is different from Blue Sky, which is different from, I don't know, Telegram. Like these things where people send text to one another do develop different cultures. I think Threads absolutely risks basically turning into Twitter, and in a lot of ways, and for a lot of people will. I also think a lot of people's Twitter experiences were sort of self-inflicted. I think who you decided to follow and engage with and what you decided to share, like if you just went on and talked about NBA, you had a very different version of Twitter than people who yelled about politics all day, right? And I think to some extent, just having a sort of forced experience of starting over goes a really long way. And I think just that alone is going to change versions of the discourse. But like, are there going to be similarly horrible political fights? And are there going to be main characters on Threads who just get ruthlessly harassed until something horrible happens? Like, yeah, it's going to happen.
Are you guys changing how you use Threads versus Twitter? Like consciously? Because for me, I definitely have like a different approach. I'm like, okay, I learned Twitter was where I could like kind of stumble along.
Say more. What are you doing differently with Threads?
I'm being more thoughtful about it. Like I'm being more thoughtful about what I post. And like, I have the urge to post all sorts of horrible shit posting. And I usually do on Twitter. And I'm like, maybe I don't on Threads. Maybe a bunch of people don't want to hear these thoughts about toe hairs. And I think they all should.
But people on Twitter super did.
They didn't.
That sounds like a Tumblr thing.
Yeah, that was really a Tumblr thing. I mistook the audience. But I think that the audience feels clearer, at least in these early days of Thread, of like what you can do and kind of how mean you can get, how weird you can get. And you always want to like scale it back just a little bit. Don't get too mean. Don't get too weird.
And David, I think your point about, the opportunity to start over is a big one, is totally spot on. And I think the early culture these networks create matters, as we've seen with Blue Sky already, for example, and Mastodon in a different way. I do want to just check our like white man privilege of like using these platforms. I do think because of the public nature of Twitter and Threads, if you are a minority or someone who is easily targetable, unfortunately, on the internet, you have a wildly different experience with these public platforms. And it doesn't matter who you follow, like it comes to you. Like I've seen enough examples.
The mansplaining still appears in my threads.
Yeah. And that's coming to Threads. It really is.
It's already there. It's already there. It started last night, like almost immediately. Somebody was like, let me tell you what you're saying. And I'm like, no, I said it.
And Crayons, be honest, like the mansplaining is probably the best of the worst, Like there's far worse.
Yeah, this was like fairly mild mansplaining. Yeah. I've definitely had it way worse. And I'm sure it's just gonna come. And I think that's just like, I think most people who go online and simply exist and people get mad at them, which is a lot of us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We're kind of accustomed to it by now. It sucks and it shouldn't happen and there should be tools and stuff. But I think that's a hard problem to figure out, how you do those tools, how you balance them, and don't turn into whatever happened to Facebook in 2016. And like, you just kind of have to, I mean, this is me saying it as an old haggard witch of a woman who's been on the internet a very long time. You kind of get used to it. You kind of learn to like what stuff to ignore and what stuff to report. And so far it's like, you're stupid.
You shouldn't get used to it. Like these platforms should do better.
Yeah, you shouldn't. But
yes,
that's a hard,
I know
like something like mansplaining. Like, how are you going to report somebody for being like, they think they know more than me? Moderator, fix it.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to work. It's just going to be like, well, yeah, I'm just not going to engage with you. And at Twitter, I probably would have engaged a few times, right? Like I probably would have been like, let me explain things to you. Let me be optimistic, or eat shit, asshole. And here I'm like, I've done this before. I see you. And I'm just not going to feed the troll.
I will say it was comforting to see that Threads had basic moderation things like blocking and muting built in on day one.
Oh, I've already blocked somebody. It was great. I was like, beautiful. I won't. You can DM me and I'll tell you who I blocked, but I'm not
Yeah.
gonna say it here.
So optimistic but cautious, and we should definitely check back in on this. I thought it was a good question. Next one, should we expect a high velocity of new feature additions, and would that even be possible under the regulatory scrutiny that Facebook is correctly subject to? We kind of already touched on the regulatory scrutiny. I do think there's going to be a high velocity of feature tweaks and changes to this product, especially now that it has garnered so much attention that exceeded Meta's wildest dreams. And what happens in these big companies is that these projects start as like small resource constrained things. Threads has like a few dozen people working on it. And when they see that it's working, a bunch more people want to work on it. A bunch of resources get thrown on it. Zuckerberg himself is very excited about it now. So I expect that the team building it will swell and they'll ship a lot faster. I already know, for example, like the internal employee build lets you do things like tap on a profile and it expands to see it in full. Like they're already making a bunch of like small tweaks on the edges that will ship soon. And then, yeah, Mosseri's already confirmed a following only list is in the works. He has told me and others that they don't plan to do DMs. I have a feeling they'll go back on that after they see how much of a powerful loop that is. At the very least, they need to make it easier to share threads to like Instagram DMs, for example, or just other DM apps. That could be a lot smoother, and they know that.
Let me shit talk in peace, Threads.
Any features you guys want to see like quickly?
Better search is, I think, the biggest one, and something that the company is relatively good at. So I suspect that's coming. But what I think is going to be really interesting is to see how much they want to do here, because I think one of the things that is true is that it is simple, and that's part of what is good about it. Also, Mosseri said this to you, Heath, that Instagram, the app, is bloated and messy and too much, and they're actually and this is like, this whole company goes through this constantly, right? They add a million things to the app and then they go, oh my god, this app is a mess, and then they get rid of some stuff and simplify, and then they add a bunch more stuff, and this is just like, this is the meta pendulum swing at all times, and they're in a sort of simplification phase right now. And I think also part of what has appealed to people about Threads already is that it's very straightforward and it works. And so I think the idea that they're going to be like, now you can make a podcast inside of Threads is like, they'd be stupid to think that that is the answer, right? And so I think what we're going to see is them try to figure out what is smart to take from Twitter and what is like actually not what makes the platform work. And I suspect we'll get a lot of stuff really fast. I think you're right, because this team is actually just in a position to ship really fast. Like building stuff just inside the org structure of something like Instagram and Facebook is hard and takes a long time and a lot of people. And this is a team that just can make things and now has like a big win under its hat and is going to be able to make things faster. But I do wonder how far that goes.
They have Jane Wong, legendary
Jane Wong,
app scooper. Jane Wong, which means she probably won't be posting her app dumps
more scoops
anymore, which is a huge bummer.
Or they just hired her to be Threads exclusive, which would be a super cool move.
Just like a PR move.
She's literally working on Threads. She's a Meta employee now. It's pretty wild. Okay, this is a good one too. How will journalists and other people who provide real-time important info be able to be verified so users know the info being posted is legitimate? We've obviously seen how this has played out on Twitter since Elon changed the check marks. I am verified on Instagram because media brand I worked at in 2015 had a social media manager who knew someone at Facebook, got everyone verified in the newsroom.
That's how I got verified on Twitter.
Same.
Anyone who's worked in a newsroom long enough knows that that's how it worked up until like a couple years ago. Meta has a paid verified program now. So I think they're phasing out the you have to know somebody to get a check mark. They're going to let people who got that check mark keep it. So thanks, Meta. But yes, I think going forward, Meta will tell me if I'm wrong, but you need to pay to be verified on Instagram. They actually, I believe, ID check you. So I think there's a level of process.
Actual verification.
Yeah.
So I cannot make a Nilay burner account.
Well, you can try. I mean,
I will try.
We should try.
I'm going to wait till he's back on the show to do it.
Yeah, but there is a level of actual scrutiny of someone's identity when you become verified on Instagram that far exceeds what Twitter is doing currently. So if you see a check mark on Threads, it's the real deal. Don't hold me to that, though. I don't want to be sued. But yeah, how do we feel about this, the checkmark thing with Threads?
I didn't know you could pay. That seems...
Yeah.
It's basically like Twitter in that they're trying to get away from the check mark means...
You're special.
Special.
Yeah.
Which is honestly the only reason I ever liked the check mark. I love like very visual ways to validate myself. Thank you.
But Meta is at least trying to make sure that not everyone demands a blue check.
But yeah, Meta's actually checking, whereas like
Yeah.
Twitter's thing was like, oh, you have a credit card, you're in. And so that's good. Like, I think that's actually how it should work. Not necessarily that you should have to pay, but that like they are actually checking and making sure that the person is the person. Like, that's great. Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think part of me wonders if the whole idea of the blue check is just being sort of beaten out of usefulness. Twitter kind of bastardized what it means. Tumblr would just like sell you one as a joke, which I thought was very funny and still love very much.
You can buy 20 if you want.
Yeah. And so I kind of wonder if we're at a point where we're going to need some other connotation of this person is who they say they are. And to some extent, being connected to Instagram is useful in that way because there are just more tools to verify people on Instagram than there are on Threads or Twitter at this moment. And so I think having those connections might be useful. But I don't know. I continue to wonder if any kind of check is going to mean much to people for very long.
At some point, I feel like it's just going to be a little like thing you kind of look over and you're like, oh, that person's really who they say they are. Oh, that's a parody account. Oh, that's just somebody who's too lazy or, you know, brand or something. Like,
I hope so.
I think at some point we'll get that and that'd be great. But different way of working on the internet.
This is also, I would point out, a potential upside of the Fediverse is this becomes a thing that not every platform has to do for itself, that we can have bigger, broader cross-system tools for verifying people that actually make a lot more sense.
Oh my God. That's going to be the first big fight between Meta and the Fediverse is verification.
I think one of my great conspiracy theories about Threads and ActivityPub in general is that Meta actually has no interest in doing things like that and only does it out of basically obligation because it runs the platform. Meta doesn't care all that much about your content. Your content is just annoying for Meta, generally speaking. It wants your activity, it wants you to be paying attention, it wants you to be on its platform, but it didn't really give a shit what your posts are. It just wants you to like hang out.
Oh, 100%.
So giving you a feeling that your posts are yours and someone else can deal with all the hard work of doing something like verifying that you are who you say you are, but you can just use Threads because it's a better app. They can just focus on making a good app and all the stuff you do around it doesn't have to be their problem anymore. I actually think that's an enormous win for Meta down the road.
I think you're right. Okay, one last question, and then maybe we can call Nilay, TBD. Will there be third-party API platform integration for other developers on Threads? I highly, highly doubt it because Meta as a company, their last time they tried to do a developer platform, it resulted in Cambridge Analytica. So they have decided as a company...
Jesus, when you say it like that.
They could do it again. They did do a very good job that
see, Mark Zuckerberg's still running the company. I think he remembers those Senate hearings and the lawsuits and the fines, the record fines.
But he took the wrong thing from that. Instead of being like, I shouldn't collect as much data, he was like, I guess that means no third-party apps. Like,
is this really... David's teased this. Are we really going to have to explain Cambridge Analytica?
No, I'm not doing this.
No. Cambridge Analytica was not about your data. It was because Facebook let third-party developers use your data in ways they shouldn't have. Okay, end of story.
Yeah, but they collected all of it, and it was a repository.
Go watch the documentary, The Great Hack. It gets almost everything wrong.
And that's what he took. No, I don't want third parties.
Look. I will turn this podcast around.
Okay. Liam is telling
I'm right
us
and everyone's wrong.
We've got to move on. I guess, quickly, just to summarize, no, I do not think they will do a third-party platform. Because of that, it's probably a good idea. I would say it's at the very, very end of their to-do list and probably something that their senior leadership does actually just not want to do at all. So sorry, but it's a good idea, but no.
I think that's right. My question would be, Heath, on that respect, I think, because I can't stop talking about ActivityPub, one of the things Mosseri has said a couple of times is that part of the upside of ActivityPub is you can support the standard and kind of be part of the ecosystem, but you can also build threads only stuff just inside of the app. So what I wonder is less like, do they want to support developers, and more, do you think they'll go the road of like, I would call it like the iMessage thing, right? Where it's like you can send SMSs through iMessage, but if you're iMessage to iMessage, you get this whole like universe of other stuff you can do.
Yes.
Is that where Threads ends?
That's totally where it's going, and it's so ironic given that Meta spends all its time shitting on iMessage whenever it gets a chance in ads
it's a
and in
good
interviews.
playbook.
Threads will be the blue bubble of the Fediverse, and we're all gonna have to live with
good.
that.
That's good. Yeah. I like
Okay.
that.
You just made all the Fediverse green bubbles so mad. They
Get
are
at me with your
tooting
toots, guys.
furiously.
Okay, those are reader questions.